Kai had never imagined that a peaceful diplomatic mission would take him to an alien world. But here he was, standing in the middle of a grand hall, surrounded by beings whose beauty seemed impossible. The planet of Xiron was home to the Andoril, an advanced species known for their intellect and grace. The humans, still in their early stages of intergalactic diplomacy, were here to help resolve the tensions that had been brewing between the Andoril and human colonies. As Kai adjusted his uniform, his eyes scanned the crowd of aliens. Their skin shimmered in various hues, glowing softly under the artificial lights. Some had elongated limbs, others had wings, and some even seemed to flicker in and out of existence as if they were made of pure light. It was a bit overwhelming, but Kai had learned to take things one step at a time. He wasn't here to stare in awe at the beauty around him, though it was hard not to. The Andoril were a race unlike any other, but it wasn't the creatures with wings or the ones who appeared like shifting lights that caught his attention. It was her Elira. She was standing near the far end of the room, talking with a few of the other diplomats. Her bioluminescent skin gleamed softly in the low light, the faint glow of blue and silver creating an almost ethereal aura around her. Her long black hair flowed down her back, with strands of silver running through it as though the stars themselves had decided to take residence within her locks. Her eyes were the color of deep violet, shimmering with a kind of wisdom and mystery that Kai couldn't tear his gaze from. The others in the room seemed to take her beauty as a given, their attention drawn to the discussion she was having with the other delegates. Yet to Kai it was as if time had slowed. The noise of the bustling event faded, and the only thing that remained in his world was her. He quickly snapped himself out of the daze, mentally scolding himself. He was here to work, not to get lost in the allure of an alien species. But no matter how hard he tried, his eyes kept drifting back to her. He tried to focus on the other Andoril, the political figures discussing the human colony's issues. But all his mind could think about was Elira, and how her mere presence made everything else seem irrelevant. It wasn't just her looks, though. He had seen beauty before, but nothing like this. There was something about her confidence, the way she carried herself, that made her even more captivating. She stood tall not just in stature but in poise. She spoke with authority, yet there was a certain gentleness to her voice, as though she had mastered the balance between power and grace. She wasn't just another alien, she was someone who commanded respect. As the hours passed and the event continued, Kai found himself lost in thought, wondering about her. What was she like when she wasn't wearing that calm, composed mask? What did she think about humans, about their place in the universe? It was clear that she didn't believe humans had much to offer. In every glance, every movement, she carried the subtle message that humans were primitive, that they were too rough and unsophisticated to ever truly appreciate the complexity of a species like the Andoril. He didn't blame her for thinking that. In many ways, it was true. Humans were still in the early stages of their intergalactic journey. They were often seen as chaotic and unpredictable, a species that still had a lot to learn about peace and diplomacy. But Kai couldn't help the way he felt. There was something about Elira that called to him, something he couldn't quite put into words. Finally, the evening came to an end. Kai found himself at the door, about to leave the hall, but as his hand touched the handle, he caught a glimpse of her again. Elira was standing alone, looking out of a large window that overlooked the city beyond. The soft glow of her skin made her appear as though she were part of the landscape itself, blending seamlessly with the stars in the sky. It was in that moment that Kai knew something had changed within him. He had spent most of his life thinking. He knew what beauty was, but Elira had shown him a different kind of beauty, one that was not confined to human standards. It wasn't just the way she looked, though she was stunning beyond compare. It was the way she moved, the way she spoke, the way she made everything feel just a little more extraordinary. He shook his head, trying to clear the thoughts that were racing through his mind. He was a soldier, after all. He wasn't here to fall in love with an alien. He wasn't here to be swept up by the intensity of her presence. Yet, in that fleeting moment, he couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something he never could have anticipated. The days passed, and the diplomatic talks between the humans and the Andoril continued. Kai's role was to be a liaison, ensuring that the human delegation stayed in line and that the discussions moved forward smoothly. Yet every time he entered the room, his eyes sought her out. Elira was often the center of attention, surrounded by others who admired her for her intelligence and beauty. It wasn't just her looks, although her glowing skin and graceful movements were enough to captivate anyone, but the way she spoke. Her voice carried the weight of experience, wisdom that only centuries of existence could offer. Every word she spoke seemed to command respect, every glance filled with the knowledge of her species' superiority over the younger human race. Kai couldn't help but be drawn to her. He was aware of his own awkwardness, of the fact that he didn't quite belong in this world of political delicacies and alien sophistication. But every time their paths crossed, he found himself wanting to learn more about her, wanting to know what made Elira so different from the other Andoril he had met. One evening, after a long day of discussions, Kai found himself walking down a quiet corridor of the Andoril embassy. The soft hum of the building echoed around him, and the cool air brushed against his skin. He wasn't sure where he was going, but it felt like the right moment to clear his mind. That was when he saw her again. Elira was standing by a balcony, her back to him, looking out over the city. Her skin shimmered under the light of the twin moons that hung low in the sky. She seemed lost in thought, her usual confident demeanor replaced by something more fragile, more human. For a brief moment, Kai wondered if she ever had moments of doubt just like he did. Did she ever feel like an outsider? Did she ever wish she could just let go of the expectations placed on her? Without thinking, Kai approached her, his footsteps quiet on the stone floor. He cleared his throat softly to announce his presence, not wanting to startle her. Elira turned her head, her violet eyes locking with his. "You're far from the gathering," she said, her voice smooth, almost too composed. "Shouldn't you be with your people?" Kai shifted uncomfortably, his mind racing. "I needed some fresh air. The talks are overwhelming." Elira nodded, her expression unreadable. "The weight of diplomacy can be tiring," she replied. "But it's necessary. Your people seem eager to join us in the greater galaxy, but they are still so raw, so new." Kai felt the sting of her words, but he didn't let it show. "We're learning," he said. "We're getting there. But I don't think that makes us any less worthy of being heard." Elira didn't answer immediately, her gaze drifting back to the horizon. Kai took a step closer, the distance between them shrinking, though neither of them moved to close the gap. There was something about her that kept him on edge, something that made him want to understand her, even if she didn't fully understand herself. "You know," he began, his voice hesitant, "I think the thing that makes us raw is that we see beauty differently. We don't have the same standards that you do, but that doesn't mean we don't appreciate it. I've seen things on Earth that I thought were beautiful. But you," he stopped, unsure of how to continue, afraid of making things awkward. Elira raised an eyebrow, clearly curious. "And what about me?" she asked, her voice tinged with amusement, though there was an edge of skepticism beneath it. Kai swallowed, his heart beating faster. "You have this light about you," he said quietly. "I can't explain it. I've never seen anything like it. You're beautiful in a way that I've never understood before. Not just because of the way you look, but because of the way you carry yourself. I guess I'm just trying to say that I see it. I see you." The silence between them stretched for a moment, and Kai felt his cheeks flush. He had said too much, said something that probably made him sound foolish. But then, to his surprise, Elira didn't laugh or dismiss him. She just stood there, her expression softening slightly, the usual walls she had built around herself momentarily lowering. "Beauty," she murmured, "is not something you can see with just your eyes. It's in the way you understand the world, in the way you interact with it." Kai nodded. "I get that. But I think beauty can also be in the way someone makes you feel. And when I'm around you, I feel different. I can't really explain it, but it's there." Elira's eyes softened, and for the first time, She didn't look like she was judging him, like she was questioning every word he said. Instead, she looked thoughtful. "You are an interesting human," she said, her voice quieter now, almost reflective. "Most of your kind would see me and only appreciate my physical beauty. But you're different." Kai smiled, the tension easing between them. "We're not all the same," he said. "You can't judge a whole species based on what you see." Elira didn't respond immediately, and Kai realized that maybe, just maybe, she was starting to see something different in him too. She had always assumed that humans were beneath the Andoril, that their beauty could never be understood by such a rough species. But Kai was beginning to show her that perhaps beauty wasn't just about appearance or intellect. It was about connection. It was about how two beings could find something special in each other, even if they came from completely different worlds. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," Kai continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I wanted you to know that I see you, not just as an alien or a diplomat, but as a person, and that means more to me than anything." Elira met his gaze, her violet eyes no longer full of skepticism, but something else, something deeper. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "humans aren't as primitive as we think. Maybe I've been wrong about you." Kai's heart skipped a beat, and he allowed himself a small smile. Maybe this wasn't going to be the easy mission he had expected. Maybe it was going to be something more, something that neither of them could have predicted. The following days were filled with intense diplomatic discussions, but Kai's thoughts often drifted back to Elira. He couldn't help it. She had become a constant in his mind, her words and her presence lingering with him, even when they weren't together. They had shared only brief moments, fleeting conversations, but something about those moments had stayed with him. He began to see her in a new light, one that wasn't tied to the physical beauty of her glowing skin, or the elegance of her movements, but the depth of who she was as a person. Elira, on the other hand, continued to watch him from a distance, as though she was still trying to understand this strange human. She didn't believe that humans could truly understand the concept of beauty as the Andoril did. For her species, beauty was about intellect, refinement, and the way one presented themselves to the universe. It wasn't just about physical appearance, it was about the totality of one's existence. Kai was still struggling to fully understand the Andoril way of thinking. Their culture was so different from human society. Their standards for what was considered impressive or desirable were worlds apart. He often found himself at a loss when it came to navigating their conversations, but that didn't stop him from trying. One evening, after another long day of talks, Kai found himself in the same corridor where they had spoken before. He wasn't expecting to see her, but there she was, standing near the large window, gazing out at the night sky. Her form was bathed in the soft glow of the twin moons, her silver hair shimmering with the light. She seemed lost in thought, her usual confidence replaced by something more vulnerable. Kai hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. "Elira," he said, his voice a bit uncertain. She turned at the sound of his voice, and for the first time, there was a softness in her gaze. "Kai," she said, almost as if surprised to see him. "I didn't expect you to come this way. Is there something you need?" Kai smiled, though it was tinged with a little nervousness. "I was just thinking about something. I didn't want to interrupt you." Elira raised an eyebrow. "Interrupting me," she said with a slight smirk. "I am hardly so busy that a conversation would disturb me." Kai chuckled nervously. "Right, I guess I just wanted to talk. If that's okay." Elira stepped aside slightly, motioning for him to join her by the window. "Of course, you know it is a strange thing to be so far from home, isn't it? So much unfamiliarity." Kai nodded, looking out over the city. "Yeah, it's all very new to me. It's hard to understand sometimes. I've spent most of my life thinking that things could only be a certain way, that what's beautiful is only what I've been taught. But you've shown me something different." Elira's expression softened, though she still seemed unsure of how to respond. "I have shown you nothing," she said, her voice gentle. "You're simply seeing something that was already there." Kai frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Elira turned her head slightly, glancing out over the city once more. "Humans are strange," she said, almost to herself. "You see beauty in things that others might miss. You look at the world with eyes that have not yet been clouded by centuries of perfection." Kai couldn't help but feel a little hurt by the way she spoke about humanity. He knew that his species was young, that they were still learning and growing, but to have it thrown in his face like that made him uncomfortable. "We may not have centuries of perfection," he said, his voice a bit sharp, "but that doesn't mean we don't know what beauty is. You think it's just about intellect and refinement, but maybe it's also about seeing things for what they are. Maybe beauty is about seeing potential, about finding something special in the most unexpected places." Elira turned her head, to face him fully now, her violet eyes locked onto his. For the first time, she seemed to truly consider his words. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "I have been dismissive. I assumed that beauty could only be understood through intellectual refinement, through centuries of culture. But maybe I've missed something." Kai's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Elira took a step closer, her eyes searching his face, her voice quiet and thoughtful. "I see the way you look at things, Kai. You don't just see what is in front of you. You look beyond it. You look at people, at life, with a kind of wonder that I've never seen before. You don't judge things by how they appear. You see the beauty in their potential, in what they could become. And that is something I had not considered." Kai felt a warmth spread through him. Elira was not just talking about how she had looked at him. She was beginning to see the world the way he saw it, to appreciate the human way of understanding beauty. And somehow, that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, there was hope for them after all. "You're saying that you see beauty in me?" Kai asked, a little unsure if he was interpreting her words correctly. Elira's gaze flickered for a moment, and then she nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I'm saying that I see beauty in the way you see things, in the way you understand people. It's different from what I'm used to, but it's not any less real." Kai's chest tightened, his heart racing. He hadn't expected this. He had always been the one looking at her from a distance, admiring her from afar, unsure if she could ever see him the same way. But now, standing here with her, in this quiet moment, he could feel something shifting between them, for the first time. Elira didn't look at him with judgment or skepticism. She wasn't the distant, untouchable alien that Kai had imagined. She was someone who, despite all their differences, was starting to understand him. And that, in itself, felt like a victory. "I've been thinking about something," Elira said suddenly, her voice soft. "About humans and their perceptions of beauty. Perhaps I've been wrong. Maybe there's more to it than I realized." Kai smiled, feeling a surge of hope. "Maybe you've just been looking at it from the wrong angle." She gave him a look of amusement. But there was something more in it. Something deeper. "Maybe," she said quietly. The tension between them had shifted. They weren't just two species on opposite sides of a diplomatic mission anymore. They were two individuals, discovering the strange, beautiful connection between them. The peace talks had taken a new direction after Kai and Elira's conversation. Kai could feel the subtle shift in their interactions. Elira no longer seemed as distant or cold, though there was still a layer of formality between them. The days were long, filled with negotiations and political discussions that often left Kai exhausted. But even in the midst of the chaos, his thoughts kept drifting back to her. Elira, the Andoril woman who had shown him a side of beauty he never imagined existed. Kai had spent most of his life as a soldier, focused on duty and mission, but Elira was changing the way he thought about the world. It wasn't just her appearance, though, that still took his breath away. It was the way she carried herself, the way she seemed to understand things no one else could. But what had started as admiration had slowly turned into something more. Something Kai didn't know how to deal with. One afternoon, as the talks grew more intense, an unexpected crisis arose on the planet. A group of rebels from a nearby colony had launched an attack on the Andoril capital, demanding more autonomy. The situation was tense, and the city was quickly thrown into chaos. Kai found himself thrust into the middle of it, his military training kicking in as he moved to support the Andoril Defense Forces. He hadn't expected Elira to be involved, but when he found himself standing in the middle of a war zone, the last person he thought he'd see was her. Yet there she was, standing tall and calm in the midst of the madness, coordinating with the Andoril soldiers with an ease that took Kai by surprise. Her glowing skin seemed to shine even brighter in the smoke and fire, her presence commanding the room. She moved with precision, barking orders in a language Kai didn't fully understand, but somehow he could sense her authority. Elira wasn't just a diplomat or a politician. She was a warrior in her own way. And it was in that moment, as he watched her lead her people through the chaos, that Kai realized just how deeply he admired her. Not just for her beauty or intellect, but for the strength she carried. "Kai," Elira called to him, her voice cutting through the noise. She was standing near the edge of a building, pointing toward a group of rebels who had made their way toward the central square. "We need to move quickly. Can you help with the evacuation of civilians?" Kai nodded without thinking. On it. He knew that this was no longer about the peace talks or their personal differences. This was about survival, about doing whatever it took to protect people. The next few hours passed in a blur. Kai moved through the city, coordinating with the Andoril forces and assisting with the evacuation. It was hard to keep track of time, but he noticed that Elira was everywhere, her calm and determination setting the pace for the others. There was no fear in her eyes, only focus and a drive to protect her people. At one point, while they were both working to clear a building, they found themselves face to face, standing just a few feet apart in a hallway filled with smoke. The tension between them was palpable. But this time it wasn't just the kind of tension Kai was used to. It was something different. It was the weight of everything that had happened in the past few days, the way their worlds had collided, and the bond that was starting to form between them. "Kai, you've been extraordinary," Elira said, her voice low yet steady. "I've seen how you handle yourself under pressure. I didn't expect this." Kai didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to hearing praise, especially not from someone like Elira. He had always been taught to keep his emotions in check, to be the soldier who never wavered. But with her, he felt something different, a vulnerability that he had never allowed himself to show before. "I'm just doing my job," he said simply. "But I'm glad I can help." Elira studied him for a moment, her violet eyes searching his face. There was something in her gaze now, something warmer, more personal. "You've helped more than you know," she replied softly. "It's not just about the job, Kai. It's about how you've shown up. You've shown me that there's more to you than just your training. There's a depth to you, a compassion." Kai felt his heart race at her words, but before he could respond, a loud explosion shook the building. He instinctively grabbed Elira's arm, pulling her down behind a nearby pillar as debris fell around them. "Stay down," Kai shouted, his protective instincts taking over. Elira nodded, but there was no panic in her eyes. She wasn't afraid. Instead, she seemed calm, focused. She didn't flinch or look away from him, even as the sounds of battle raged outside. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. They were in the heart of chaos, but in that small space behind the pillar, it felt as if nothing else mattered. Kai realized that despite all the differences between their species, they shared something deeper than he could have ever expected. "Are you okay?" Kai asked, checking her over to make sure she wasn't hurt. Elira smiled, a small but genuine smile that made Kai's heart skip. "I'm fine, thanks to you." They shared a quiet moment, just the two of them, amidst the chaos of war. The sounds of distant gunfire and explosions filled the air, but it didn't matter. For a brief second, all Kai could think about was how strange it was that he had gone from seeing her as someone distant and unapproachable to someone who felt real, someone who was standing beside him, fighting for the same cause. "You're not like the others," Elira said quietly. "You see things differently. I didn't think I would find that in a human." Kai chuckled softly, feeling the weight of her words settle in his chest. "I'm not like the others," he agreed. "But maybe that's what makes us stronger." As they prepared to move forward, Kai knew that this moment, this shared experience, was a turning point. He no longer saw Elira as just the elegant, distant diplomat he had once admired from afar. He saw her as an equal, someone he could stand beside, and for the first time he felt that maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to see him the same way. The battle had subsided, the city slowly returning to a fragile calm as the rebel forces were pushed back. Kai and Elira, along with the other members of the human and Andoril forces, worked tirelessly through the aftermath. The wounds were both physical and emotional, but as the situation stabilized, Kai found that he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between him and Elira. They had fought side by side, their lives intertwined in ways they hadn't expected. The bond that had started as a curiosity on Kai's part was now something deeper. Every glance, every word exchanged seemed to carry more weight than before. Kai had always been focused on his mission, but now, as he saw Elira giving orders, comforting her people, and holding herself with such strength, he realized just how much he admired her, not just for her intellect or beauty, but for her courage, her resilience. They had seen each other at their most vulnerable during the chaos of the battle. Elira, though outwardly calm, had revealed glimpses of something softer, something more human. For the first time, Kai felt that perhaps they weren't so different after all. Maybe, despite the vast cultural divide, they were more alike than they both wanted to admit. Later that evening, as the sun set over the distant hills, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Kai found himself walking along the edge of the city with Elira. The streets were quiet now, the bustle of war replaced by the hum of normalcy returning. The air was cool, carrying a hint of the fresh night, and the two of them walked in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. "Are you sure you're all right?" Kai asked after a while, glancing at Elira. "After everything?" Elira's violet eyes met his, and for the first time in days, she didn't hide behind the formal mask she had worn so often. There was a vulnerability in her gaze that Kai hadn't seen before. "I'm fine," she said softly, though her voice carried a weight of truth. "But I've seen things today that I wasn't prepared for. Things I thought were only stories." Kai nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The violence, the fear, the sudden chaos. It was something neither of them could have predicted. The world they knew had been turned upside down, and they were both forced to adapt. "I've never been through anything like this either," Kai admitted, his voice quieter now. "It's strange, feeling like you're standing on the edge of something bigger than yourself. I've always followed orders, done what I was told, but today I felt different. I don't know. Maybe it was because of you." Elira stopped, walking, turning to face him. The words hung in the air between them, her gaze sharp and thoughtful. "Because of me?" she asked, her voice curious but guarded. Kai felt his heart race. He hadn't meant to say that out loud, but it felt like the right moment, to be honest. "Yeah, you've been through so much. You don't just lead your people, you protect them. I've seen that. I've never met anyone like you before." Elira's expression softened, though she didn't speak for a moment. She seemed to be weighing his words, and Kai could almost see the gears turning in her mind. "I'm not perfect," she said slowly. "I've made mistakes. I've made decisions I regret. But seeing you today, fighting beside you, it made me realize something." Kai took a step closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "What did it make you realize?" Elira hesitated, her gaze shifting away from him for a brief moment as though she were gathering her thoughts. When she spoke again, her voice was low and sincere. "It made me realize that maybe I've been wrong. I've always believed that humans couldn't understand things the way we do. That your kind was too young, too reckless to see things clearly. But you've shown me that. Maybe beauty isn't something we understand only through age or culture. Maybe it's something simpler, something deeper. Kai's breath caught in his throat. You mean? Elira looked at him then, really looked at him, her violet eyes full of unspoken emotion. I mean that you've shown me something I've never considered. You've shown me that the way you see the world, the way you care for others is beautiful. I never thought I'd find that in a human. But I was wrong. Kai's heart swelled at her words. He had spent so much time admiring her, wondering if she would ever see him as more than just another soldier in a mission. But now, standing here with her, he could feel the weight of her words settling into his chest. It wasn't just admiration anymore. It was something much more personal, something real. I never thought I'd hear you say that, Kai said quietly, his voice filled with emotion. I've always seen you as this perfect, unapproachable person, but today, when I saw you fighting for your people, I realized you're more like me than I ever imagined. You're not just an alien or a diplomat. You're someone who cares, and that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The silence between them felt heavy, but it was no longer awkward. It was a shared moment of honesty, of vulnerability. Elira stepped closer to him, her presence more than just physical now. It was like everything that had happened. Everything they had been through together had led them to this moment. Kai, Elira began, her voice almost a whisper. I don't know what this means. What's happening between us? But I know that I don't want it to stop. Not yet. Kai's breath hitched, and for the first time in his life, he felt completely unsure of what to do next. But something inside him knew that whatever was happening, whatever this was, it was real. I don't want it to stop either, Kai said, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. Maybe we don't have all the answers yet, but I want to figure this out with you. Elira smiled, a small but genuine smile that reached her eyes. And in that moment, as the two of them stood together, looking out over the city they had both fought to protect, Kai felt something shift within him. It wasn't just the bond between two soldiers or two diplomats. It was something deeper, something neither of them had expected. But as they stood there together, with the city beginning to heal and the night settling in around them, Kai realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something neither of them could have predicted. The days that followed the battle were filled with a quiet kind of healing. The city, once torn apart by conflict, began to slowly rebuild, the scars of war fading as new foundations were laid. Kai found himself staying in the city longer than expected, not because of duty, but because he couldn't bring himself to leave. The connection he had with Elira was something he couldn't ignore. It had been days since their conversation under the setting sun, but the words they shared still echoed in Kai's mind. Elira had been more than just an ally or a diplomat. She had become someone he trusted, someone he could rely on. And even though they both came from different worlds, something about their bond felt universal. As the sun dipped below the horizon one evening, painting the sky with shades of purple and orange, Kai found himself once again walking with Elira. The air was crisp, and the sounds of the city seemed distant, as though the world had become smaller and quieter, just for them. They walked side by side, neither of them speaking at first, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came when two people no longer needed words to understand each other. Kai glanced at Elira, her face illuminated by the fading light. There was a softness in her expression that wasn't there before, a gentleness that only deepened the more he got to know her. She wasn't the perfect, distant alien he had first thought her to be. She was more human than he could have imagined. It's strange, Elira said quietly, breaking the silence. How much things can change in such a short time. How quickly you can go from seeing someone as an outsider to seeing them as someone important. Kai stopped walking, turning to face her. He didn't know why, but hearing her say that made something inside him stir. It wasn't just about the battles they had fought or the danger they had faced together. It was about how they had seen each other, truly seen each other for the first time. "I never imagined I'd find someone like you," Kai said, his voice low but steady. "I came here thinking I was just doing my job, but I didn't expect to feel like this. Like I've found something worth fighting for, something more than just the mission." Illyra's eyes softened as she looked at him. There was no mask now, no formal distance. She was simply Illyra, someone who had shared a journey with him, someone who had become as important to him as anyone he had ever known. "I didn't expect it either," she admitted, her voice quiet. "I thought I had everything figured out. My people, my role, my place in this world. But then I met you and everything I thought I knew felt wrong. You've shown me something I couldn't see before. That maybe beauty isn't just something we define by our culture, by our ideals. Maybe beauty is something we find in each other, in the connection we share." Kai felt a warmth spread through him at her words. He had always thought that beauty was something reserved for the world of the Andoril, elegant, intellectual, refined. But Illyra had opened his eyes to something else. Beauty wasn't just about appearance or intelligence. It was in the way they cared for each other, in the way they stood together when the world seemed to be falling apart. "I never knew I needed to see the world through your eyes until now," Kai said, his voice filled with sincerity. "You've taught me that the world isn't just about what we can see, but about how we connect to it, how we connect to each other." Illyra smiled, a smile that was both tender and full of understanding. "And you've taught me that there's more to humans than I ever imagined. You're not as primitive as I once thought. You see things in a way that's simple, but beautiful." Kai reached out, gently taking her hand. The gesture felt natural, like it was always meant to be. Illyra didn't pull away. Instead, she let her fingers rest against his, a silent agreement that this, whatever it was real. "I don't know what comes next," Kai said, his eyes searching hers. "But I know that I want to face it with you. I want to learn more about you, about your world, and about how we can make this work." Illyra's eyes flickered with something, hope, maybe, or something deeper. "I don't know what comes next either," she replied, her voice steady. "But I do know that we can't go back to what we were. Things have changed, and maybe that's a good thing." They stood there for a moment, the sounds of the city now just a faint hum in the background. The universe, it seemed, was no longer a vast and distant thing. It was something they both shared, something they both had the power to shape. The stars above them began to appear one by one, twinkling in the clear sky. For a moment it felt as though the world had paused, giving them a space to breathe, to be. Illyra's hand was still in his, and the warmth of her touch was enough to erase any doubts that had lingered in Kai's mind. "We're from two different worlds," Kai said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But maybe that's exactly why we belong together. Maybe it's the difference that makes us stronger." Illyra squeezed his hand gently. "Maybe it's the connection that matters most," she said, her voice full of quiet strength. "The way we see each other, the way we learn from each other." Kai smiled, a small but genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I think you're right." They continued walking, side by side, as the night unfolded around them. There were no grand promises, no certainty about what the future held. But in that moment, with Illyra beside him, Kai knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. And that, for the first time in his life, felt like enough.